2003, just shortly after the verdict, and you were given a verdict, and then you were supposed to come and sign for it at the TRC offices.
When you say verdict, you mean the amnesty?
The verdict of the amnesty, yes. So they will communicate. At the time, I was the one following through on the most of the issues. I went to collect the affidavit, the verdict rather, and I found quite a number of members as well. And we started there to move. We lost others along the way, others have passed. But that's how the movement started. And we've sort of made a commitment, really not written anywhere, that we are the only ones who understand our pain, and no one else does. And even if people do, very few care. So let's rather support ourselves and start to work together. And that is why, Chair, not only today, my legal team will tell you that maybe some 8 years or so ago, I started seeing my chances of finding my sister diminishing. And I will say to them, but that shouldn't discourage us, because there are others who we are fellowshipping together, and I have a responsibility as well, as a person and a member of a team that have others to assist where I could. And I'm sitting here today on behalf of all those 25 families. I almost know all of them. Their difficulties and the road that they've traversed. I don't want to claim that I know their experience. This thing is very painful. I wish it to no one else, not even my worst enemy, to undergo what we are going through. But I do believe that we've created a movement, one could call it, that we just can, even if we can't do anything else, but support and care for one another. And that is how I interpret my presence here today, not only on behalf of Noatula, but on behalf of the 25 and more who might have not heard that we deserve justice. To me and the team, it would have been very important. But also care to give an explanation when the state takes some decisions, maybe rightly or wrongly, on our behalf. I find it very wrong for us to go and challenge a policy on our matters in court when I'm coming across the policy on the newspaper. I just think there could have been other things, even if they don't care, that could have been done slightly differently and better. But ultimately, we feel betrayed. I feel betrayed myself as well. The state has betrayed us. I'd hope the old system may not do anything, but I'd hope that the new system will at least give me the truth, which is what the TRC promised us. Nothing else, just the truth. So I guess that's what I can say on behalf of these families, but it is and it has been a very lonely journey. In some instances, we are being made to feel like, why don't you just forget, move on? I've tried so many times, but I sit with the 85-year-old mother who has not buried her child. And I simply can't forget. That's how I feel. Thank you, Constance.
Thank you, Mr. Malani. Can we now return to the story of your sister, Noatula Simelane? And if we can go back to 1983, can you explain to the Commission at that time, as far as you were aware, what political activities was she involved in?
I wouldn't say I was aware, really, at 9 years, 10 years old.
With hindsight?
With hindsight,
what you know
yes.
Today.
As I'm saying, recollecting and putting up the pieces. She will come, she will disappear, and then there will be action. My father will not sleep. There will be movement of people who are in the house. They don't go out. The house is always locked. I always got to understand later on that, for example, the father of the girls, Ubab Kayana, Victor, who died with Bani in the last mission on Sasol, as they were crossing back to Swaziland, we were staying front opposite. Now, my parents will also fear that I will recognize and go and tell their children in the house that I saw you dead. And I actually think I spotted him one day, and I did say, there's a girl of my age then, Ulindi, and I said, you know, I think I saw your father, Lapekai. And this was an MK soldier. So I know that from my aunts, my grandmothers, because we come from a very small community, Petale Mzinon, my paternal family, almost all of them, the 9 of them stay there. So they will hide guns with them, and all the missions. My uncle was working at Sasol, was the one who organized the cards for the reconnaissance for the Bani and them. But these are issues that I then got to understand. The movements I recall, the activity I recall a little bit as a 9-10-year-old girl, right up until I think I was around 14, 15, which I can say that's where I lastly saw a lot of movements than I normally would see. And that corresponds actually with the death of Bani in 1985, that the mission still continued. My father was assisting, but they went down because mostly both the front opposite neighbor, as I'm saying, passed in that 1985 with a certain Vincent Sikiti. So we've also met as families. We have ran a process of reburial and exhumation where they were buried in Pitritif. So that conscientized me even more. And at the time, Dad was alive, Mom still alive, and I will be able to deduce quite a lot of what is happening. And in fact, they will make jokes of how I used to be a problem to their struggle, because I'm told I was a very hyperactive child. So it was very difficult to confine me when there were issues that they wanted nothing to be helpful. I have recollection of Ipoi Subab Shabang, who I would still even recognize later on. I think he was cooperating very well with the team and the groups of the ANC, particularly my father, that he will come and not get into the house. If I'm outside the yard, tell your dad I passed here. That was a message to say they possibly are coming. And most of the time when Bab Shabango has done that, a day or two or that evening, there will be a raid. So that's what I recollect. By the way, commissioners, the loss of Noatula in my family and Bani is not the only one. My father adopted my aunt's son. And an adoption really is it's a way of trying to define it. I think as Africans we know that you can take your aunt's son and stay with him or her and without paperwork. So my father was running some businesses. That was his profession. My mom was a teacher. So he was assisting, and he got very political as well. And they had to move him to stay in Soweto with another relative when the police were very strong now on raids and arrests. He was shot by the police in Bongo High School.
Thanks, Ms. Similani. If we can get back to Noatula herself. Am I right in saying that in 1983 she was based in Swaziland and she was at college, and one of her missions for the the African National Congress underground was to act as a courier between Swaziland and South Africa? Is that a correct paraphrasing?
Yes, that's the paraphrasing that I understand as well. I understand it as well also as what she was doing on her last mission, the mission that we know led to a disappearance. I'm made to understand she was bringing a message from Swaziland for the establishment of the Val Triangle unit at the time that MK was trying to open or unlock. So that's the understanding I have, that she was a member of Mkhonto weSizwe, and her main task was mainly to carry as a courier messages for whatever reason.
Thank you. And can you briefly describe, again with the benefit of hindsight, as what you know today, what happened to Noatula, starting in that fateful mission?
We're made to understand, commissioners, that my sister departed on an instruction of one of the commanders, Noatula. Mpo, I think, was his code name, but we reference him as Mpo. His real name is Gilbert Twala. He testified at the TRC as well. And he organized a safe house in Soweto, in Snawane, the home of the late and former Eguruleni Mayor, Duma Nkosi. And my sister left Swaziland and went and put up a night or two at Duma's place before proceeding to Carlton Center for the appointment. And it is in Carlton Center, as she left the Snawane safe house to Carlton Center, where she never returned. So as we began after the graduation, picking up the pieces really, I went with my parents to Snawane and we found her bag, traveling bag. I think it was jeans inside, stuff and stock that my mom could identify that this is my bag I bought for her, etc., etc. And we took that stuff. If I'm not wrong, it should have been the December holidays of 1983. Noatula disappeared just a month before her graduation. So as I'm saying, the calendar, their graduation will also be around August, September. So she was sent in this mission at the beginning of September. If I'm not wrong, her graduation was the end of October that year at the University of Swaziland. Yeah.
Thank you. And at that time, as I understand from your evidence in your various affidavits, your parents made strenuous efforts to try and locate Noatula, and all to no avail.
Yeah, my parents made effort. My mom in particular, my father had quite heavy restrictions in traveling. For example, my mom traveled alone with one of my aunts from Swaziland to go to Botswana when the leads were somehow suggesting that go to the head office or whatever of the ANC in Botswana. So it's my mom who went there to go and register with the ANC that such has happened. They hired an investigator as well from a legal firm. Maybe investigator may not be the right word, but they hired a legal firm of de Klerk to go through the borders to check, to go through the morgues and everything to check at that period a description that could fit that. They started their own investigation as well, went back to Swaziland, including my cousin Bani, and they started from Mpo, that is Gilbert, and everybody else to try and connect the chain. And I think it is that chain that led them to Snawane, where we picked up the bags. So they went to very much untold extents. I used to laugh at the story that they even went, somebody told them there's a good sangoma who can tell them where my sister is. And they attempted even that, and it brought no fruit. And it just brought anguish at home continuously, yeah.
Thank you. So, through the 1980s, you and your family were in the dark. But there was some kind of breakthrough because, am I right in saying that in 1990 there was a feature article published in the Sowetan? Can you explain to the Commission why that was regarded as a breakthrough and what that article disclosed? And before you do, Commissioners, there is a copy of the Sowetan article in Bundle 4 between pages 782 and 785.
Page?
782 to 785.
Are those the Sharon Chetty articles?
The Sharon Chetty article.
Okay.
Exactly.
Commissioners, it's briefly what I explained earlier, that in the write-up on the preparation towards the TRC and also the search that my family was on in relation to Bani and Bani's possible child, which we weren't certain, there were articles which were written by Sharon Chetty. I think the first one or the other one had a picture of Noatula at the corner, and she was missing, obviously. And then one of the officers who guarded her in the farm obviously did not know our family, then went to Sowetan and looked for the journalist, who's this Miss Sharon Chetty, to say, the girl you have put there, I know her, I guarded her. And that's the breakthrough. We otherwise, possibly, if there wasn't that article, or if there was that article and there wasn't this, ultimately we know him to be Mr. Nimrod Vey. If he didn't come forth, he read the story and kept quiet, I doubt if he would have been knowing or had an idea of what would have happened. So that gave a breakthrough. And the journalist then brought Mr. Vey home to meet my parents. In the article, I think we're referring to him as Mr. X, because he was very scared of his identity to be known at the time. But subsequently, Honorable Chair, it then got to be disclosed at the TRC hearing that it's him who visited us and gave the information on the whereabouts of what happened ultimately from Carlton Center to the farm in Northam, and possibly what could have happened to her at the end of the movement from the farm to somewhere where we are not certain exactly where was she taken to.
Thank you. So that then brings us to the early 1990s. And for the first time, you and your family now have a sense of what happened to Noatula, namely that she was abducted by the security branch at the Carlton Center and then held in various locations. Can you just give an indication to the Commission of what you know happened to Noatula following the abduction?
What we know, Honorable Commissioners, is that following the abduction at Carlton Center, Mr. Norman Mkonza, who was called Scotch, led my sister to the basement of Carlton Center. They were meeting at a restaurant. I'm forgetting the name, but in the records it appears. And then they already were special branch in that restaurant, and others were on the basement. So he lured her to the basement, they got into the lift. As the lift opened, we are told that they were both apprehended and put at the separate booths of cars. And my sister was driven to police flats, residential flats, where they were staying with the name escapes me.
Was it called the Norwood Barracks?
Norwood, thank you. Norwood, a block of flats. The estimation suggests she was kept there between 7 and 8 days under constant torture. And the reason in the explanation is that because it's a residential, there were children obviously playing and they could hear her screaming and whatever. She was then moved to a farm in Northam. Northam by demarcation then used to be in the northwest. Northam today by demarcation is in Limpopo. Just about 4 kilometers outside Northam. I've been to the farm myself. That's where she was taken to and arguably kept there from that mid-September to around October, November. The evidence sort of, it's difficult to tell for exactly how long. Was it 5 weeks or 6 weeks? But the information we have suggests that she was kept towards the end of the year, later in the year of that 1983, and was put in a boot of a car which was driving her back towards the Carltonville direction, back to Gauteng, and that's where we know her trace to have ended, at that four-way stop. We don't know where was she taken to after that.
And Ms. Milani, we know from the evidence given before the TRC's amnesty committee, particularly by the individuals such as Mr. Veyu and the other guards who were securing her, that there is some evidence about the treatment she received at the Northam farm. Can you give an indication of the kinds of treatment that was meted out to Noatula?
Chair, the record gives a very painful evidence. It suggests that my sister was severely tortured. She was tortured to an extent that sometimes she would soil herself, and they would throw her into a kettle, zinc them for her to possibly rinse herself. And in some instances, she will be drowned in that dam when she wasn't cooperating or not giving the information, as the officers tell us. She was kept 24-hour in a very small room. It's a storeroom, actually, no window, nothing. And she was kept there. There was just a small single bedroom, and she stayed there for the duration of her stay in that farm. We are told that as part of torture, her sleep was kept to a very bare minimum. And she wasn't fed properly, so the description at the TRC says she was beyond recognition. And that's a description which was not disputed. She was kept in shackles 24 hours. And because of possibly the abrasion between the shackles and the skin on the hands and both the ankles, she was swollen and couldn't walk and couldn't move. And the officers, when she wants to relieve herself, like go to the bathroom to urinate, they will carry her. Sometimes they will leave her there, and yeah, she will obviously soil herself.
And the evidence suggested that the security police were attempting to turn her. What do you know about that from the evidence led before the amnesty committee?
Well, yes, commissioners, in the evidence that was led, the police were divided into two groups as they were leading evidence, and the outcome itself, as you go through it, does indicate this distinction. But what I understand was that the team of Mr. Kutse and others recorded that they were able to turn her, and they minimized the torture, and then they released her, and she released her back to Swaziland. And as she was still even in caption, she gave some evidence which led to some bombings, you call them false flags, in some two stations, I think in Sandton and Bryanston and Soweto, and led to the arrest of a few others who were coming from Swaziland. But that gave us a very good homework with our legal team, because we went and looked for the articles, because those were recorded, and some happened long after Noatula, some happened even before she was apprehended. And the notion of her cooperating was dispelled, in my view, at the TRC. It corroborated the notion of the other group, Veyes Lamulela, who the commission found to be truthful, that they will even beg her to say, these people are going to kill you, talk. But the evidence of the ANC itself, which is on the record, because I did explain that my maternal family comes from Swaziland, so most of the ANC houses in Swaziland were registered in my sister and my uncle's names, and that evidence was led. And right all the way after Noatula had been captured, disappeared, the ANC was able still to operate with no harm, even in areas or things that if she had spoken, really there was going to be a major damage to the ANC. And in my view, I think Snawane Dumankosi should have been the first one to be arrested. Because I guess the question, logically, when you apprehend a person will be, I'm picking you up now, it's 10 o'clock, where did you sleep? The first person she should have taken out is Dumankosi. She was not even supposed to go beyond back to Swaziland. She should have said, I slept at this person, and this person is also responsible for the PWV region, and we exchange information, and he will be arrested. But that didn't happen either.
Thank you. In your view, was Noatula betrayed?
A record tells us so, commissioners. How Noatula came to South Africa, Commander Mpo gave an instruction, you go, and the person you're going to meet at the Carlton Center is Mr. Mkonza Norman, and his code name was Scotch. Unbeknown to the ANC, that Scotch was not even an Askari, was a pure policeman planted in the ANC in Swaziland. I'm told there were two. It was Scotch and Frank. I think Frank's surname was Langa. I've forgotten the name, the real name. Frank was a code name. So that's how my sister fell into capture in Carlton Center. But for me, I think I understand that. I don't think there is a soldier that goes to war with an expectation that we'll all come back alive. I think my father understood that as well. My mom understands that. I think the worst betrayal for me is when we are left in the ledge just to find the truth. Because we can't all raise her. We can't wake her up. I want her back, but I know that it's not possible. But at least the worst form of betrayal that could be avoided is after all this sacrifice, then she's betrayed again. I think that's the worst for me.
Mr. Malani, if we can turn to the attempts to investigate your sister's abduction, brutal torture that left her unable to move, her face unrecognizable, and then what you believe to be her subsequent murder. You mention in your 4 November 2025 statement, Commissioners, that's at page 620 of Bundle 4, and from paragraph 20, paragraph 17 at page 623, for the first time it appears that this matter is being investigated, and you say that the matter was transferred to the Dolavira unit towards the end of 1996, and it was handled by Captain Andrew Leask. Can you give an account to the Commission as to the progress in investigations from that point?
At the time, Commissioners, I was a student at the university, but I had much time assisting in what my parents were now seized with, the search of my sister. Just slightly before that, on paragraph 16, it talks about the case, which I said I remember my father going to John Foster. And if I recall very well, a step before that was my father visiting the Premier of Mpumalanga. And the Premier of Mpumalanga, who was Matthew Sposa, then referring my father to the Minister of Safety and Security, Sydney Mufamadi. And Sydney said, I can't help if there's no case reporting the person missing or anything. You now have direction. Remember, Sowetan has already written, we have been told who were these officers, and they are still in the employ then of the state. And subsequently, I think that's what led to the opening of the case and the beginning of the appointment of Mr. Leask as the department or SAPS to investigate the case of Noatula. It started very well. There was huge progress, I must say, and very positive progress. Mr. Leask was able to go firstly to Swaziland, round up almost everybody from my aunt's uncle and everybody else to check on the who was she working with and all that, all the investigation. And the docket obviously was then opened, the first team actually to go to the farm and all that. And we were getting feedback in relation to what is the findings bit by bit as he was doing the investigation. And subsequently, we don't know how, he then stopped the investigation, and we were told the investigation has been transferred. I think there was Deolavera and Toms in the investigation group or team that took over after Mr. Leask, and that was the end of us.
Just before we proceed, and just for the record, the Dolavira unit, am I correct in saying that that was, Mr. Dolavira was Director of Public Prosecutions, I believe, based in Pretoria, and following the publication of the Goldstone Commission report into political violence, where there had been exposés around the role of the security branch, the Dolavira unit was established under Mr. Dolavira to investigate these crimes. Am I also right in saying that Mr. Andrew Leask went as far as taking a warning statement against Mr. Kutsia for the murder of Noatula?
Commissioners, you are correct. I actually even think that after the warning statements, they were suspended from the police and the investigation continued. I may not recall the dates per se, but as he started the investigation, the suspensions also kicked in and warning statements were taken.
And Commissioners, that was during 1996, and I believe the warning statement is at page 498 of Bundle 4. You were saying, Ms. Simelane, that Mr. Andrew Leask was removed from the investigation at a certain point. Do you have any idea why he was removed from this investigation?
Well, I don't have. Suffice to say that when one was asking, particularly at that time, we got to understand that the cases and the issues that relate to the TRC, or the cases that have got an implication to relate to the TRC, are not going to be investigated. I've had a look. I don't think I still have, and the legal team may assist here on all. In fact, that police docket of Leask at the end was written by pen, refer to the TRC. So that's how I would assume the investigation did not continue.
So at paragraph 19 of your statement, that's a statement before this commission, you mentioned that Captain Leask was instructed by his superiors to stop his investigation and hand the docket over to one Captain Mike Holmes, because it was apparently going to form part of a larger case against former SAP General Krappies Engelbrecht. But then you say the following: Captain Holmes did not investigate Noatula's case further. Did that bring an effective end to the investigation into Noatula's disappearance?
I may say so, Chair. That's why in my previous statement I said then that was the end of us. Because there was this investigation and we were cooperating very well. We made sure that Mr. Leask is our family is availed in Swaziland, my aunts, my uncles, everybody that he deemed fit to speak and talk to as part of his investigation. And we're getting feedback. And after that, when the docket was transferred, we never had any progress. And there was no investigation that concluded. That continued to even conclude on the case or possible what should be done about the case.
And in fact, Ms. Simelane, it didn't just suspend the investigation into what happened to Noatula. The evidence that you've placed before this commission suggests that no investigation transpired for the next 13 years.
Yes, nothing happened for many, many more years. Even after this 13 years, the 13 years after that was about a push, which one had to make sure that I write, I constantly visit the NPA, I do anything to make sure that the investigation happens. Hence the subsequent court cases right up to 2015, which in the main was compelling the state to investigate.
Can I ask for your reaction to the fact that, or let me first put this to you. In your view, what could potentially have happened if Detective Andrew Leask was allowed to continue unimpeded with his investigations?
I think arrests would have happened. Here is a man who had already started investigating, has given them, what do you call them, the sworn statements. They are suspended from work. The next step should have been they must go and face the case in court. They should have been arrested. And I do believe if you follow his investigation trail, you would see that he had made good progress to arrive at that step. I also believe the employer just did not take it lightly to suspend 3 or so of their members at a go without thoroughly assessing what would have been found in the investigation at the time.
So we're around the year 1997. Your sister's case was now before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Perhaps you can just describe to the Commission what the TRC did in relation to the case. I believe there was a human rights violations hearing, and then, of course, the amnesty process.
Chair, let me put this, and I don't want to sound ungrateful as well. And I would like to understand, to the best of my ability, the circumstances that the TRC found itself under at the time. It was just one disorganized process. For example, we never consulted. We actually did not even know who our legal rep as a family was, because Mr. Eric van der Berg was by the state. So we met him during tea time after he had already started. For example, something as basic as that, just to know what are the key issues you think needs to be raised. That was the starting point, but nonetheless, they did their best. That is why I'm saying I don't want to sound ungrateful that all was lost. There were wins, there were losses. Secondly, it was a process that I think was hurried because of time pressures. I don't think it's because they were negligent or anything. And that they were not even able to look deeply in some of the issues that are on the table, even in relation to any case. They couldn't even, the process in most instances, including my case, did not even have room for additional people who know or who could shed light, who could be interviewed. And in most instances, even the outcome as you look into it does suggest that it left some of the matters hanging. I mean, the closing paragraph says, well, the final fate of Noatula was not what this inquiry was able to look into. So which means referred to an investigation. Maybe, yes, they wouldn't have been able to find anything, but the evidence at the TRC itself was leading as to what ultimately could have happened. But those questions and those issues were not dealt with. But I think they did their best. But our experience was a bit, it was not an easy, good ride. We did most of our research ourselves. My brother was a historian, so he did quite a lot of work, Lungelo, and was very close to Swaziland and their operations as well. So I can, with certainty, say if he wasn't there, we could have fell short more than what the TRC could have been able to come out with.
And am I right in saying that your parents appeared at a human rights violation hearing of the Truth Commission in Leandra on the 3rd of June of 1997?
That's correct, Commissioners.
And of course it was a short hearing because there simply wasn't much information available.
Exactly. I think this is the point that I'm echoing, that it was mainly about what my father was saying. Also, you lost your daughter. What do you think? And very, very brief and short. But at least it laid the foundation for the hearings themselves to take place. I appreciate that.
And then in your statement before this commission, you make reference to the amnesty process and in particular the amnesty decision, AC/2001/185. Can you just very briefly describe who applied for amnesty and who was granted and who was denied amnesty?
It was quite a number who applied, and some did not appear, and nothing was done about them. I think Brigadier Squon, I may be getting the titles wrong, but he was the senior who, I'm told, authorized the very COP 10 or 10 dry operation that they were doing. He applied, but he never appeared. Those who appeared, it was Kutsie. I would prefer, Honorable Chair, just to call them by surnames, so that I don't mix the sergeant, colonel, and because they were at various different ranks. But they were led by Mr. Kutsie, there was Mr. Pretorius, Mr. Mong. Mr. Khampepe did not appear or did not apply, but you will see appears on the papers because he was present. Mr. Slamlela, Mr. Vey. The statement prior the sitting of the TRC had other policemen who at the time the TRC said had already passed on, that died. I remember Mr. Peter Lingene. I remember Mr. Sifuti. I remember Mr. Mutibi. If I am correct, the three had passed. I'm certain about Lingene, I'm certain about the old man, Mr. Sifuti. I mean, Mr. Mutibi. I can't remember if Sifuti had passed, but he did not appear. But there were statements and application towards involvement in the Noatula, either from abduction, kidnapping, torture, as part of the charges that the TRC then was investigating. So it was around 9 people, but I think 3 out of that did not appear.
And can you indicate which of the applicants were granted amnesty for the kidnapping?
Okay. I beg your pardon, Chair, I forgot Mr. Mkonza. Mr. Mkonza appeared as well. Now I'm reminded because he was granted amnesty. Mr. Mkonza was granted amnesty. His role, and I differ fundamentally with the Commission, and it's okay, I accepted that. His role was to look to Carlton Center and to the basement, and he says that's where I ended. I never had contact from her. I don't know what happened to her. Please leave me out. But evidence shows us that when Mr. Lisk was looking for him, he went to Mr. Kutsie and they started rewriting statements and all that. I don't think it would have happened if ordinarily he had left it at Carlton Center, but he was granted amnesty. Mr. Vey was granted amnesty. Mr. Slamlela was granted amnesty. The Commission found them to be truthful in the possibility of what could have happened to Noatula. It found them that they did not reduce the element and the state of torture. They were explaining fully how she was tortured right up until the end. The Commission was not happy with the evidence of Mr. Kutsie, the evidence of Mr. Pretorius, the evidence of Mr. Mongo. I think those were the 3, because Mr. Squon did not appear. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone.
Yes, no, I think that's a good summing up. And just to complete the record there, am I right in saying that Mr. Kutsia, Pretorius, and Mong were denied amnesty for the abuse and torture
Yes.
of your sister?
You are correct.
But they were granted amnesty for the kidnapping. I'm also right in saying that they did not apply for amnesty for her murder.
Yes, they were granted amnesty for kidnapping. I think everybody was granted amnesty for kidnapping. And none applied for murder. And the commission also did not look into possibilities of murder. So you are correct. They were granted amnesty for kidnapping.
So that then brings us to the end of the section dealing with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And now there was substantial information and evidence on the record, particularly from the guards that the security branch had deployed to secure your sister at various places. What were you expecting then, given that all this evidence was now on the table?
Well, I expected a prompt investigation because remember we had a pre-investigation of Lisk. He might have not concluded it, but was able to also place the very same persons who have placed themselves in the scene of crime, for a lack of a better way of putting it. And now there is even an outcome which says you have not been fully truthful in relation to torture. And in our view and our medical opinion that as a family we got was that the extent of torture would have led possibly to excessive kidney or whatever failures as they've explained it. So murder was a huge possibility. We thought that will be investigated quickly and there will be charges that follows and they will go for trial. Unfortunately, that's not what we got.
So what then transpired post the TRC, and what steps did you and your family take to try and get this matter investigated?
Chair, the TRC had an investigator. The main one was Ubabfani Mulap. And you will recall that before the TRC closed its or submitted its final report, the TRC was still operational in a very smaller scale now. I don't know how many times I went there to request for what is the way forward. And everybody will tell us, no, you are part of the report. The NPA will deal with the cases. So between that period and the final report, there was a lull. There was nothing that was happening, and there was no assistance that we offered. We will try our own avenues to either try talk to ANC people and whatever, whom we think may know a thing or two, but it came to almost nothing. And then we received the report. We started going back again now, visiting, and the offices were now all closed altogether, and were left in the lurch. There was not even a person you could call for a bit of time for you to be able to say, okay, now I have this outcome. What now? Who's going to take my matter forward? We stayed in that position of limbo for a very, very long time. I'm not sure if you want me to continue from there. I can be a bad witness, I realize.
No, I totally understand the need to relate the story, but perhaps if we can just pause for a moment. You mentioned in paragraph 20 of your statement before this commission, you make reference to the Priority Crimes Litigation Unit, which was established in 2003. and the fact that the TRC cases were referred to that particular unit. And I can also advise you that the then National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Bulelani Nguka, declared the TRC cases as priority crimes. And you say that your case was specifically brought to their attention in November of 2004. So given those developments, did you have some hope? Were you encouraged that something was going to happen?
Of course, Chair, and once I found that, I did not wait. I may not remember the year exactly when there wasn't communication coming from the PCLU. I actually tried to make means to look for them. Who are they, so that I can just get to understand. And as a result, I'm the one who went to them and find them to engage on my sister's case, in comparison to my family being contacted by the Priority Crimes Unit.
But it appears that post-2003, you weren't getting any news. There were no developments as far as you could tell. At what point did you make contact with Yasmin Suka and the Foundation for Human Rights to assist you?
Chairperson, at the time, the Missing Persons Task Team, there's a lady called Madeleine Fullard, and there were a lot of articles that were coming out. They were finding bodies, they were searching, they were doing this as part of another unit of the TRC at the NPA. I looked for Madeleine. I went, I presented myself, I said, hey, I've got this case. Can't you guys help me? Of course, I don't know the body. If I knew, I would have gone there a long time ago. So it was not within their scope. And she explained, no, this is not part of our scope. Our scope is exhumations. And your sister is not yet. But she said, I know people who could help you. I was introduced to Yasmin of Foundation for Human Rights. Through that process, I did not even know that there was a foundation that existed at the time. Then I went to the foundation carrying all the pieces and articles that I had at the time and requested for assistance. And at the time, you will recall, my father is late. My mom is stressing more. It was just not a nice time. It was not a nice environment at home. And I got to meet the foundation. Then we started to put the pieces together. And I get to be assisted really on what I need to do. What does this mean exactly? Because as a lay person, you just look all over. You just unsure on what to do. So that's how I met Yasmin.
And with the assistance of Yasmin Suka and the foundation, did you then start to have meetings with the PCLU at the offices in Silverton? And if so, what was the general outcome of those meetings?
Yeah, the journey began. The order may not necessarily be now in my head, but I know that the foundation then met with my mom just to get the fuller picture and close on some of the gaps that I wouldn't have known in terms of the flow of Noatula, her being and everything else. And then we started to make an appointment. I think the first meeting we attended, there was Tori Pretorius and there was Raymond Ackerman, myself, Yasmin. There could have been 2 or so people from the foundation as well who accompanied us, and we introduced ourselves. We introduced the case of Noatula, and the request was just for an investigation and take through the process of the amnesty report, which we also had in our position at the time.
And I understand from your statement that the PCLU was indicating that they weren't able to pursue with the case, and what was the main reason they were putting up?
Well, Chair, from the beginning it was clear that the unit was formed. I'm not sure if I must call it unit, but the unit was formed. It had no investigators for the longest time. There were instances where we met and I was told, no, wait, we have deployed all our personnel to the 2010 Soccer World Cup. We do not have access personnel to assist in such matters. And the other story will be the protocols have not yet been developed. The unit is there, but there's still a relationship between the unit, SAPS, and whatever. We still are not yet done in the harmonization of the procedures and the protocol. But there was one barrier after the other. In the main, they were not in a position to start with the investigations at that time.
And so you mentioned that they said that protocol or some guidelines had
Yes.
to be developed. Now in the timing, this would have been through 2004 and 2005.
Yes.
And we know that these guidelines eventually were promulgated at the end of 2005. Can you just indicate to the Commission what these guidelines were about and what your concern was?
Okay, Chair, I must indicate that from the beginning, my understanding of the guidelines and protocols was not necessarily what tend to come out. As I'm trying to explain in my layman's language was, I understood them to be meaning that there is a unit, but this unit must relate to the investigators at SAPS and any other in relation to investigation. It was only when there were interviews, I think I heard it on radio or something, I called my legal team, I said, hey, I heard something that there's a release of guideline and whatever. Then we started trying to make an inference possibly that the protocols and the guidelines they were talking to or about maybe means this one. But nonetheless, even on our first, my naive thought, there was nothing that came to be investigated. And then the policy or the guidelines or the protocols were then released. I think the first part I had, Chair, now we are in a box in the NPA. We're around 300 or 400 cases. We are known. I found it very, I don't know what will be the best way, very uncaring for the NPA not to even look for one or two people to say, what do you think are your views? Now that you have gone through the TRC, you have an outcome. And this is what the outcome suggests. What do you think about this process? I view it as a backdoor amnesty. I view it as people who just gave us the first room, say, come here, you testify, you listen, you get an outcome, and you must all abide. And we did. I mean, my form of injustice starts when the case my father opened, nobody negotiates with him as to whether it remains a case or not. But take care and you take it. It moves to the TRC, you are given terms. You abide by them. And then at the end of responsibility being taken by you or others, then the rules change again. So we kept on being dragged and pulled as if no one gives a damn how we feel. Oh, I'm sorry. No one cares about how we feel as victims as well. Now we are classified by the state. The report says, deal with these people. Even that legal care, even if it's just a letter, if the consultations were not possible, to say, here, find the attached. Please go through it. We think it's important because of 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will make you arrive to closure. And I felt, no, it has to end somewhere. That I think at the time we were just taken for people who can't think for themselves or possibly who don't know what they want, and no one even cares to hear a side that we have. And I was part of that 2007 and 8, Nkadimeng and others, to challenge that guideline.
Just to assist the commissioners, the challenge that the witness refers to is part of the record before this commission. And we have provided the full pleadings, the policy, the amendments itself, as well as the judgment in that matter. That's in Nkadimeng and others versus National Director of Public Prosecutions, TPD case number 32709/07, and that paperwork is between 631 and 1,391 of bundle 4. That's Ms. Simelani's bundle. For the record, the other applicants in this matter were the widows of the Cradock 4. So the amendments to the policy, which amounted to an effective rerun of the amnesty process, because it provided the very same criteria to decline a prosecution, as well as other novel criteria, such as a suspect could say, well, I was indoctrinated at school. That becomes a ground not to prosecute. Were you offended by this attempt to provide such latitude and accommodation to these perpetrators years after the Truth Commission had ended?
Very offended. Very offended. I wouldn't have gone to a court of law to challenge it if it wasn't offending. But the only way I could prove how offended I am, I could only rely on justice. And I ask myself today if both the foundation and Weber and the team that has carried us pro bono legally, where will we be as victims? I shudder when I think about that. Because literally we are pro bono cases. From LRC, when they've got funds, they will take a portion of what they can do and help us. Weber Wenzel, almost present, always, foundation, almost present. So what the system just literally did with us after the TRC was to dump us in that box that had over 400 cases sitting in the corner at the NPA boardroom. That's how I feel to this day.
So now you and your family, and I dare say, all the others were in a similar position to you, were in a state of limbo. You were being told that in the PCLU had no access to investigators. They couldn't take forward cases without investigations. And that apparently this was pending the publication of these guidelines. And then when the guidelines were published in 2005, did anything change?
Nothing changed, except that when I now was engaging with the NPA, I could sense some anger or like, no, we couldn't even be cordial in most instances. I got a sense that I'm viewed as this person who's troubling, who doesn't want to let the matters lie as they are. But in relation to investigations or provision of support for investigation, Honorable Chair, nothing happened.
So post the promulgation of the prosecution policy amendments at the end of 2005, you were still being told that they had no investigators. At any point, were you told to, perhaps abandon justice or a prosecution and just go for an inquest?
Well, yes. As I'm saying that now after the whole policy outcome in terms of the case, even the discussions were no longer cordial. It was like, can you abandon this thing? Can you just leave this thing? Why don't you take an inquest? It was not necessarily where you sit with a person who is seeking justice and you've been mandated to assist, that you sit with the person and say, in the light of this and that, we think this is the best possible option, and informed by whatever the circumstance. In some instances, they will tell me to my face, the problem is these NGOs that are funding you. These things should be left as they are. So I believed in that I'm doing is right. What I did then, what I'm doing today, and possibly what I will do tomorrow is right. I'm convicted to the process of, if possible, getting the remains of my sister. If they are there, and I think it's the right thing to do. So if help doesn't come from where it's supposed to come, I don't think it's equally wrong to go and look for someone to help you and arrive at the outcome that you would want for yourself. But I didn't get any assistance at all. In fact, as I'm saying, from that time, leading up to 2010, there was no investigation at all. There was no resource. The last meeting we had, I think it was the beginning of 2010, not necessarily the last, but it was a meeting to say, look, we don't even have police. They are all assigned to 2010 Soccer World Cup. We do not have resource for you. So I've never enjoyed any support, to be honest.
And did you hear various other excuses as to why the police couldn't investigate? And so, for example, during the time that the Wiley Commission into the suitability of Advocate Vusi Pikoli to be NDPP, was that put up as an excuse?
It was, I think, in one or two of the meetings where there was an explanation on the difficulty on why the issues are unable, even from the allocation of investigations, the leadership difficulties that are there on who is supposed to deal with what at the NPA. But what always was a challenge for me was that those matters had nothing to do with me. I was mainly saying to them, deal with those matters, but assign justice. But I think in my meeting with Yasmin, Tori and Raymond, I remember Ray very well mentioning the difficulties that they are facing at the NPA, beyond the issues of no allocation of investigators. They were sort of not amazed that that is happening because there were difficulties in relation of dealing with the TRC cases.
So you mentioned that in 2007, you and the Craddock Four Widows went to court, and in 2008, a judgment was issued in the Pretoria High Court by Judge Lekhodi. You'll recall he set aside the guidelines or the so-called amendments as unconstitutional. He didn't mince his words. He called them absurd. He called them a conflict of a recipe for conflict. Now, after that judgment, did you expect matters to change, given how robust and decisive the judgment was?
We were elated. We even did a media interview with the widows outside the Pretoria High Court. We thought this could have been one of the challenges. It has been set aside. Now our expectation is investigation, arrest, and the matters must be ahead, you know. What struck me even more about the credit for was that they were even willing to accept any what the court says is the outcome. Because remember, going to court doesn't mean that your plea is the only one, that you may come out with it as you wanted it. It means the court must sit logically and apply its mind on everything that is possible on the table. And the outcome may not necessarily be favorable to what you have desired. But we were prepared to put ourselves to that test. And that's one thing I've learned from these elders that were in this group with them. They yearn for justice, but they're mindful that we also have a responsibility of assisting for justice to be done. So that's what it was, Chair. We got to be excited about the outcome. We received the outcome positively, but unfortunately it did nothing to our favor in relation to taking the cases forward.
And Ms. Malani, your statement indicates that it was only around 2 years later, during 2010, that eventually an investigator was assigned to your sister's case. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes, it was only after, I think, when we were right at the time of the earlier discussion that I spoke about in the year where they said we did not have available resource. If I remember that meeting, we had a bit of very bad exchanges in the meeting to say, hey, colleagues, if I'm not being assisted, I think I must then take this matter up legally. And I do believe that that exchange would have led relatively to an appointment of an investigator. And I was hopeful that now we're taking the matters forward as in the reopening of the investigation. But then there were a lot of issues which were stumbling blocks. I may not necessarily blame the investigator per se, but then we had the docket lost, and it had to be looked for and found. It had to be reconstituted. Just to create the picture, we had to restart the investigations or the interviews again. And I was requested to bring my aunt, my uncle, my cousin back from Swaziland, because remember, we're trying to recreate now. Took them to the NPA, we started. But subsequently, I think somewhere down the months, Chair, or so, the original docket was found again. And that could have been a teething problem after the investigator was appointed. But I was a bit feeling that this matter was being not handled in a proper manner, relatively very negligent on how do you put such cases aside as your priority cases, but then you still lose the information. But it's okay, we continued. We tried to recraft, and subsequently it was found, I was told.
Yes, we'll have to check on the dates, because the original docket, I think, might have only materialized a year or two later, although that's not a material issue. But so an investigating officer was eventually appointed in 2010. Do you remember his name?
Yeah, that's what Mr. Frank Dutton, may his soul rest in peace, he's late as well.
No, I think you're confusing the private investigator, Frank Dutton, who was appointed by the Foundation for Human Rights.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yes. You mean the investigator for the police?
Indeed.
It was Captain Masihela.
Right.
Yeah.
But he advised you that the docket couldn't be found and had to be reconstructed.
Yes.
And how did you feel? Because the docket had been laying dormant for more than a decade, to be told that it was missing.
Chair, I was disappointed, as I said. I was disappointed, but I also felt like there were some tricks and games that were being played behind the scenes. The docket was there, Remember, it was only through the docket that had most of the work of Captain Tlisk that we were able to even connect the dots. Even when I say I went to the farm, I was only able to get the direction of the farm because I was able to interact with the person who had already been to the farm to see where she was held, where she was kept and all that. So that for it now to just disappear, I found that to be, yeah, it was negligent, it was angering, but I also felt that I'm in for a ride here, and I'm not very sure what is this ride about, but I'm just not getting any joy about the system. As I had said, Chair, I could not even estimate for how long because of the passage of time, but I think the record can be able to help us. How long did the docket disappear? But as I say, at the request of Captain Serela, we had to transport the family back from Swaziland so that he can be able to interview them afresh. That work list had already done. Actually, they did not come this side. He went to the original settings where Noatula operated and worked. But remember, now when we are trying to reconstitute, we are relying more on my aunt who Noatula was staying with. Of course, she was staying in her own flats and rest, but her home was Swaziland, where my uncle and my aunt were. And they had to come back and we start the interviews again and piecing up. And I must really say it was a very emotional journey for my aunt as well. It's very, very painful to raise a child who disappears 4 weeks before you see the work of your hard labor. You know, the time of Noatula's disappearance is very hurtful for us.
Just for the record, Commissioners, the docket, the missing docket was eventually discovered some 2 years later, towards the end of 2012. And this emerges from Ms. Similani's 2015 affidavit in the application to compel a decision. That's at paragraph 19 of that statement, and that's at page 23 of bundle 4. We're coming to that particular application shortly. So you mentioned earlier about a decision that you and the foundation took to appoint a private investigator, the late Frank Dutton. Can you explain to the Commission why you decided to take that step?
Commissioners, my earlier experience, besides the docket and the assistance that obviously we had to give to Captain Maserela to be able to put up a duplicate docket, he was alone in the main, I think reporting to a certain Colonel Kaba or something, and was running this investigation, and it was very a wide scope, right? It had the elements of Swaziland, the elements of Soweto, the elements of a possible Western area because of the direction of the car, but two reports that Colonel, I think it was Captain Maserela gave me, which made me unhappy. And I think the record will remind me of the surname. It was a white officer who were trying to look in piecing up. And his report was that that officer is late and he passed the system. And we got to discover that the officer is not late. As far as I know, even some 5 years or so ago, he was still alive. And then I went to the foundation. I said, guys, I'm not comfortable with the investigation for the state on this case. I don't think I'll get justice. For example, in the TRC record, they will say there were safe houses that the special branch was using. In Soweto was using, in Western area. I'm forgetting the other area, but in Carltonville as well. These were safe houses which are mentioned in the affidavits of the TRC, and they will go and say there wasn't a safe house, that safe house can't be found, that person and I was like, no, I just had misgivings with how the matter was. Looking at Captain Masarela, I have nothing against him. I think he did his best. I never had a misgiving that at a personal level, I think he's just delinquent or he's abdicating his responsibility. Chair, I'm not echoing that message. I saw a gentleman who was trying so hard, but was alone, had difficulties. The system possibly was not on his side. For example, this report of this officer, he just had pulled it out from Home Affairs database, and it was possible that the initials can be the same and. And at the stroke of us checking with the people who used to work in that area, who were directed where the officer is. And I requested the foundation that can we look into the issue of a private investigator. And that's how Frank was requested to come and assist in 2011.
And am I correct in saying that retired detective Frank Dutton, who was one of the most experienced detectives in South Africa and had been the first chief investigator of the DSO, the Scorpions, that he compiled reports, very comprehensive reports, which were handed over to the NPA. And what were his main conclusions? Did he believe that there was a case worth proceeding?
Yes, he believed there was a case worth proceeding with, but he also, as I'm saying, was able to go look for those safe houses, found them, even interview people who were staying there. What do they know about police work in the times and all that? He looked for the witnesses which we were told are no longer there. He looked for some of the policemen who were working within the structures of the special branch. They were operating around Moroka police station, the record told me, who were not necessarily involved in the Noatula, but his experience was that there's relationships and they know one another and they engage. In fact, one captain is still in the employ in Chimistin police station in the last 2 years or so that I know. He has been there since. So there was a great deal. In the TRC case, there was SW266, which the special branch was refusing to tell us who was SW266. And they were according a lot of that information which they claimed they got from Noatula. It was through SW266. And SW266 was Mpumi Dlamini, and we were told she can't be traced. And Frank did. Of course, he arrived after she had passed, and the family was suspecting she died of poisoning as a very harsh illness, and she passed. But we got sense of work that had been done. Of course, against the legal advice, I was feeling that the NPA shouldn't be given that investigation, that they must do their own and be able to say we can't charge or we can charge, but we're lawyers sometimes. But we gave the report to assist NPA. And I can tell you now, Jay, with my last dollar, the NPA never did an investigation that was as thorough as Frank Dutton did to date.
Madam Chair, it's 11 a.m. and I'm wondering if would this be an appropriate time for the tea adjournment?
Yes, I think it would be appropriate that we adjourn for tea until 11:15.
As the Commission pleases.
Thank you. Mr. Vani?
As the Commission pleases. Madam Commissioner, before we proceed, we would just like to hand up a graphical illustration of the timeline of the different events that took place in the investigation of this case. It is, in fact, part of the record at page 630 of Bundle 4. But just for easy access, perhaps I can just, with the leave of the Commission, hand up a copy each for the Commissioners.
Stop there.
Thank you. Mr. Vani, if it's part of the bundle, there is no need to allocate the exhibit number.
Yes, we agree. There is no need to
Yes.
give it a specific number. It's just for your convenience
Yes.
because it's already part of Bundle 4.
Yes.
As the Commission pleases. Now, Ms. Simelane, you make a reference in your statement before this Commission at paragraph 28 that no less than 3 senior prosecutors, Dr. Silas Ramate, a former acting NDPP, Advocate Ngopo Jiba, also a former acting NDPP, as well as Advocate Sean Abrams, who at that time was the head of the PCLU, they confirm in writing that no investigations were conducted on your sister's case between 2001 and March 2010. And before I put my question to you, just to assist the Commission, the letter from former acting NDPP Ramaita is a January 2013 letter, and it can be found as Annex TN 21.3 at page 525 of Bundle 4. And the letter from Advocate Jiba can be found at page 530 of the same bundle, paragraph 3 of her letter. And the letter from Advocate Abrams can be found at page 518, paragraphs 4 and paragraphs 5.16. So, Ms. Simelane, now that you had confirmation from senior individuals within the NPA that your case was not investigated for a period of, probably your sister's case was not investigated for a period of some 10 years. What was your reaction to that?
Well, it was disappointment, Chair, coupled with frustration, because of the desire one has to conclude the matter. The level of frustration was compounding, because you will move from one hurdle to the other, and there will be no sense of agency on the matter or even direction towards what you think can lead to a conclusion. I can only sum it that way. I'm lost for words. I've been battered, really, for many years on this case.
And in fact, Ms. Similani, was there estimation of the time period in which no investigators were assigned to this case? In fact, not correct, because your earlier evidence before this commission is that by the end of 1996 or during 1997, when Detective Andrew Leask was told to stop investigating and to hand over to Captain Mike Holmes, your information is that Mr. Holmes did not investigate this case. So in fact, you can add at least 3 years onto that time period.
Exactly, Chairperson, as I've already explained earlier. The initial investigation was done by Liz, and it stopped up until the appointment in 2010, which I hope we may also go to it a little bit, because the appointment of the investigating officer also did not necessarily bear positive fruits. Some of the tasks, and I think we may be having that letter on record, that were assigned by Advocate Ackerman to the investigator, they remain undone to date.
So if we can return to that period between 2010 and 2013, your evidence is that during this period, you in the foundation had appointed Frank Dutton, and he had carried out investigations and presented a very comprehensive report to the prosecutors with the request that there was sufficient evidence to move on a prosecution. But by the end of 2012, what was the state of affairs? Had the NPA responded?
No, there were no positive response, Chair, and there was no movement. And I think that's what then ultimately led to a request to my legal team that I am convinced by the action or non-action thereof that it's either the NPA doesn't have an interest in this case or just don't want to do anything about it. I'm not sure. Or they're avoiding doing it because there was just nothing happening. And I think that's what led around that 2013-14, we started exchanging letters again, but subsequently that led to my 2015 affidavit, both as ordinary and one in camera,
Yes.
if I'm not wrong, yes.
Before we get to your 2015 application to court, am I right in saying that around 2012 or thereabouts, you even considered bringing a private prosecution?
Yes, I did. I considered bringing a private prosecution, and I was mindful actually of the argument of the state even as early as 2007 and 8, which is what one of the issues that Judge Leroy, in my recollection, had really hit on them negatively, that it is not the responsibility of the victim to investigate, but it's that of the state. Because some of the options of the prosecutorial committee or guideline was you also may have a private prosecution line. But that, I was mindful that possibly at the back of my mind they think, oh, well, even if we don't do this, they have that opportunity, even though it has been struck off as part of what a decision that doesn't stand. But I was convinced as that time in 2014, after our almost 2-3 discussions in 2013 with meetings and letters in exchange, that there's no commitment in dealing with the case, and there's nothing that I will be able to see coming out. So I considered the private investigation, and the advice was like, Sisi, you can't afford that one. It's going to be very expensive for the family, and I left it. Earlier on, we had a discussion that even if the investigation doesn't conclude, can I be granted an inquest? At the time, the NPA had said, we're still investigating, wait with the inquest. But I think in 2013-14, I even made a formal request in a form of a letter for an inquest, which was also declined. And the basis for declining that request was saying we're still investigating. An investigation which was just not taking off and was not bearing any fruit. And I felt that now my hands are tied, there's nothing that I can be able to do.
Commissioners, the letter that the witness refers to was penned by herself, addressed to the then acting NDPP. It's dated 29th January 2013 and can be found at page 292 of bundle 4. Just before we get to your request for an inquest, you mentioned that the reason why the private prosecution didn't proceed was because it was too expensive.
Yes.
Am I right in saying that you asked your lawyers to draw up a budget to also address the question of security for costs, and that budget was a handsome budget?
I confirm that, Chair, we went to that extent. And the intention possibly was that if we get to that level, one can be able to plan for it ahead, but also can be able to hold the state responsible for the action that it elected to undertake on our case.
So returning to the letter of the 29th of January 2013 addressed to the NPA, where you now abandon your struggle for a prosecution. You appear to give up on it, and you just say, give me an inquest. Why did you take that dramatic step?
Chair, it has always been my belief, and it still remains my belief, that above all, this is not about vengeance. It's about a right to justice. It's about justice being done. But ultimately for my mom, it's about her finding out what happened to her lovely child. And I was hoping that, given the information that we had arrived at the time, an inquest could then be able to assist, shed more light towards the direction of additional information that we could have sourced or that we could have got from any other person whom we have spoken to or might have not spoken to, may come forward and be able to share some light into the matter. And I found the rejection by the NPA really not giving an option, because if the investigations were firm and promising, or at least being done, one can say give them a chance. But you will see that already we're 13 years or so down the line of no investigation or no intention to investigate properly the matter so that it can get to its logical conclusion. I think that's what made me to move, and I was disappointed by the rejection. I think it was Advocate Silas Ramaite who wrote back to my letter and said, no, we are still investigating. We don't think an inquest is. And as I say, Chair, from that 2013 letter to 2026, nothing has come much out of that investigation or those investigations.
So later that year, am I right in saying that you even took the step of approaching the UN Special Rapporteur on enforced disappearances.
Before you go there, if we can be reminded of the response by Mr. Ramaite, or the reasons, apart from a blank statement, we're still investigating. Is there anything more comprehensive or a document? Maybe in the meantime you could continue and your assistant could look for it. You may proceed.
Yes. Commissioner, the response of Mr. Advocate Ramaite can be read at page 525 of Bundle 4. But in essence, it does say that there are a range of reasons put up why they don't wish to hold an inquest, and that investigations are proceeding. But the record also shows that it wasn't just Mr. Ramaite, but there was also substantial correspondence between the witness and her legal team and other members of the NPA. For example, Advocate Chris McAdam at the PCLU, who gave a whole range of various reasons as to why the investigations were far from complete.
Yes.
And then the legal team responded, disputing all those different claims. What we'll do, Commissioner, is that we will...
No, you need not go there. It's sufficient.
Okay.
Proceed on your...
We can make reference to those communications. In fact, there is a schedule that is attached to the witnesses in camera affidavit which we're shortly coming to, that was filed in 2015, setting out all those different interactions and summarizing each communication. And we'll refer the Commission to that.
Yes, thank you.
So in July 2013, did you instruct your lawyers to, in a sense, go international by lodging a complaint against the South African government with the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Enforced Disappearances?
Yes, Chair, I did.
And again, why did you take the step of now going international?
Chair, I had believed that I had done everything within the boundaries in the jurisdiction of our law, and I have not been successful. I have not found any assistance. And I thought, as part of the treaties that could assist in the search, it will be best for me to report also the matter. Possibly I could get some form of assistance with that interaction as well.
So let's now move to 2014. And in paragraph 31 of your statement before this Commission, at page 627, at that point you eventually instructed your attorneys in July of 2014 to write a letter of demand to the NPA to make a decision. And as you said earlier in your evidence, because of the further inaction, you then decided to bring an application in 2015. That is quite a dramatic step to take. Why did you feel that you needed to go to court to force the NPA to make a decision, either to prosecute or to refer the matter to an inquest?
Commissioners, I felt that was the only thing left for me to do. I had left no stone unturned. In requests, in pleas, in meetings, in support in anything if they need to move this investigation forward. But nothing was coming on the investigation, but nothing was coming also on the decision as to whether do they just decide not to prosecute or they've got an intention to prosecute now that the inquest request has also been declined. So exactly what are you suggesting as the NPA you think it's the right thing to do or you want to do? So if you go back a bit on those letters just between that early 2013 to 2014, earlier than the July, our exchanges were more about, no, the investigation is being done. No, we've come across remains, we're sending them to Bosnia for checking. And I'm like, we now understand the movements and the possible areas if the body was dumped or if where she could have been killed. There's no relationship with what they were doing. I got a sense that they just give me anything just to make me comfortable to say, be satisfied we're doing something. The investigation says she was moved from Northam towards Carltonville, Western area direction. A mall is being built in Brett. They come across human remains which they believe are of a young girl. Then they stop the investigation. They say we are sending this for DNA assessment. What is the relationship? Lay as I am, I'm not an investigator. But logically, what is the relationship of this remains found in Brett with someone who was up there on the other side in Northam and down towards Western area direct? And we will spend maybe a year or two just dealing with remains. They will hear someone who says there are remains in Rustenburg. They will say we're searching the what records, mortuary records of remains in Rustenburg. How does she arrive in Rustenburg? Because Northam and Rustenburg, yes, you can say they are near if you are directing a person, but they not necessarily are. But what convinces you that those 5 bodies or so, she could be one of them? So they just went proper investigations being done. And it led to sheer frustration, Chair. And I felt that I now need to compel them that with all the work that they've done and all the bodies and anything that they've done, can they come to a decision whether to prosecute or not to prosecute or to give an inquiry? Of course, an inquest had already passed it in a way, but I was feeling that they now can't keep me on, we're still investigating forever. They must say to me, this is what we are going to do, or this is what we are not going to do. It was purely frustration out of all the exercise that I had undergone under the word or the name and the process called investigation, which does still today to me does not make any sense on how we went into all of the journeys that we undertook in what we call investigation in the NPA, but I ultimately went to the only body that I can rely on. Let's go to a court of law. Let me put my case, put yours, and let a neutral person being a judge find reason on who is making sense between the two parties and come to a determination on what should happen on my sister's case.
Commissioners, for the record, the papers in that 2015 case are part of bundle 4. They can be found, the founding papers can be found between page 1 and 474. And the in-camera...
What is that page number again?
12474.
12474.
And then the in-camera affidavit can be seen at 475 to 619. And in that in-camera affidavit is a schedule of all the interactions and communications between the witness, her legal team, investigators, and the NPA up to that time. In other papers, we've referred to that matter as Nkadiming 2. And the reason why we refer to it as Nkadiming 2 is because this witness was also the lead applicant in the earlier application to set aside the amendments to the prosecution policy, and we refer to that case as Nkadiming 1. Yeah. Mr. Malani, in your papers, in order to explain, or to try and explain the long delay, you included supporting affidavits from very senior former members of the National Prosecuting Authority, including the former NDPP, Advocate Vusi Bekoli, and the former head of the Priority Crimes Litigation Unit, Advocate Anton Ackerman, SC. At a very high level, what did they say in their affidavits?
Chair, the affidavit at a very high level mentioned that as they started work in relation to prosecution of TRC cases, there was interference. It was not necessarily an interference in relation to the Noatula case per se, but they had a schedule, if I recall, of about 16 cases, of which Noatula was one of them, and they were ready to commence with the prosecution on them, and they had started with the first 2 or so, and there were meetings which they also attached some of the records in their affidavits that were held, which led to the prosecutions in relation to TRC matters brought to a halt.
So in your view, did the evidence put up by Advocates Bekoli and Ackerman really serve to explain why up until 2010 there had been little or no investigations in your case and the other TRC matters?
Chair, it does. It did then, it still does today. Give me that as a reason tangible. There has never been any view that gets to suggest things otherwise. If you look from the 2001 right up to date in relation to the investigations and the case of my sister Noatula, nothing else makes sense on why there were no investigations, why the investigations were shabby, why there was disappearances of dockets, and all what we had to go through in order just to arrive at proper and sound investigation. There still isn't anything, in my view, than to say the powers that be, including at the administrative level, at the NPA, they just need to be the ones who come and say here, what is it that we had as a challenge to pursue these matters? But there is a reason, and that reason, I do believe in what Ackerman is saying, in what Tori is saying, in what Advocate Bekoli is saying. It just seems to connect very well on why we had the difficulties to deal with such cases.
Now, following the filing of that very substantial application, which also received much publicity in the media, what was the response of the NPA and the government in general?
Chair, the response was an invitation to a meeting. I may not remember exactly the order after the filing had happened, but what I recall, I think a week before the matter was to sit in court or something, I had a meeting with Advocate Sean Abrams at the time. Yeah, very difficult to really place it. I think the first plea was, can you hold on a little bit and let us conclude? This is just going to be bad. It's an indictment on the country. And that's not what I could agree to. If I recall very well, we then agreed to say he requested the time to place the charges then formally for the state to charge. And my response was, you have 4 or 5 days in my recollection of working days towards the date that would have been set for the hearing. It's up to you to act, because I hold nothing against you, but I do not believe I must be the one who betray my sister again, join the others, and not when I am convinced that the state must arrive at a decision. That was the response, and I think they did place the charges before the sitting of that trial or something to that effect. I may not recall the exact days before, but the meeting was held in person at the NPA with Advocate Sean Abrams, amongst others, including my legal team, of course.
Yes. So just to assist you, the NPA didn't file any answering papers, and nor does the record show any public reaction to the application. But as you say, the then NDPP Advocate Sean Abrams took control of the matter, and an indictment was issued on the 26th of February 2016, so early the following year. And Mr. Radebe, Mong, Kutsia, and Pretorius were arrested and charged. Can I ask you, what do you think would have transpired if you had not brought that application to court?
We'll still be in limbo even today. Not that we're out of the limbo, but we'll still be worse off. We wouldn't be in court. And I think, Chair, why I say so, there has been none of the cases besides the 2, whether you talk the Chikane or the other, at the very beginning before there was a halt, that anything was done in the main on TRC-related cases. The Nyoka, the inquest of the Kalatas and everything came as a result of they knew we were a group. We had met them actually twice or thrice as group ourselves, as families, and I think they could foresee that there is now pressure coming from families, and things started to roll, albeit a bit slow as well, in relation to other families as well. But there will just be 1 or 2 isolated cases really, which clearly deals with the number of the cases that were referred from the TRC to the NPA in relation to prosecution. Nothing happened. The ball did not move until there was this 2015-2016 action.
So in your view, it really was your application that blew the door open, so to speak,
For my sins.
and now forced the NPA and the SAPs to take these cases seriously?
I believe so, Chair. I believe so. I actually even began receiving quite a number of family members from anywhere else in the country who say, my father died in Upongolo, whoever. And the only thing I could do will be to give comfort and refer to the foundation if they can help. Some they could be able to help. Some, of course, it will be difficult for them to be able to take anything. But I do believe that Noatula's case opened the door for others as well.
And you mentioned a short while back that matters have still not been resolved. Can you just very briefly give the Commission a sense of what has happened to the case?
Well, Chair, as we all know, with the clock ticking, we don't grow young, we grow old. So yes, we got the charges in February 2016, and the 4 were charged. But quickly we lost Hatebe, if I'm not wrong, in 2019, and subsequently was followed by Mong, who passed. And that's not only from them. My entire family has been wiped out. They died, almost all of them. My aunt in Swaziland, everyone, my uncle, my father, my brother. I think I can only say my aunts in Bethal, almost everyone has died. I'm left with 2 in Bethal with my mom, who can be able to come and stand before you, Chair, and say, we know her, we raised her. Other than that, you are talking to a secondary person just like me. So I've also suffered a great deal in terms of carrying something that I'm not even sure now what is its logical conclusion and for who. My grandmothers, all of them who raised there, including Swaziland, they've passed. Very little has happened in the case. Of course, it has its own court dynamics. It has been a struggle to get the case to commence. We have been in trial within trials upon, I think, 2 or 3 of them. So they appeared, they got out on bail, and they were out, the 2 passed, and then we started a trial within a trial for various reasons, and then we had the one to confirm if practically or logically she would have died. We got that, court declaring that. Then we moved to up to fitness to stand trial. We went to vet office. We have report. We have just been concluding if Mr. Kutsie is suitable to, is fit to stand trial. The private report says no. The Vescopis report says yes, and Judge Pahlane was the one who was supposed to give the report or the judgment in the beginning of the year. And she is on special leave and was still in between that process. So in a nutshell, from that 2016 to 2026 January, that's what we have done. I may not be putting them in the order of how they would have occurred, but that's what I can say roughly, Chair.
And just to assist you, Ms. Similani, when you spoke about the interlocutories, there was some litigation, for example, on the question of legal costs.
Oh, yes.
When the state did not want to subsidize the legal costs of the former police officers. And am I right in saying that you actually intervened in that matter in order to force the state to pay those legal fees?
You're correct. In fact, Chair, that would have been the first matter we dealt with after the charges were formally placed. It was that process which I think could have taken us around 18 months to 2 years just to conclude it properly, that they were not on the frolic of their own, they were state employees, and I joined into that, and subsequently, yes, that was resolved, and then we went back to the table, and then there was another issue, and subsequently the issue of fitness to stand trial.
Commissioner's reference is made to that case. There is, in fact, a judgment. It's at paragraph 8.5 of Ms. Similani's statement before this commission at page 622. Kutsie and others versus Minister of Police and others, Gauteng Division, case number 72747 of 2016. Ms. Similani, you also approached the High Court to obtain a presumption of death order in relation to your sister. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
And Commissioner, there's also a judgment in that regard. It's at paragraph 8.6 of the same affidavit. And that's ex parte TP in Kadameng, also Gauteng Division, case number 86381 of 2018.
page number is that, Mr. Fani?
It's at page 622
622, thank you.
of bundle 4. So you mentioned a short while back that certain individuals had died, some of the accused, as well as some family members. And just to assist you, accused Timothy Radebe, he died in 2019, and Frederick Mong died in 2021, leaving just 2 remaining accused, Mr. Kutsia and Mr. Pretorius. And as you mentioned, Mr. Kutsia is now challenging the state in respect of his mental capacity to stand trial, which has still not been resolved. But I understand that others have died as well. Around 8 of your own family members and witnesses have died over the intervening years.
Yeah, correct, including Mr. Dumankosi himself. I think he also passed in 2021 or 2022. Was also part outside my family in the list of witnesses. We've lost quite a number, Chair, in the list that the NPA has drawn itself as the witnesses, possibly into the case of Noatula.
So I want to put a quote to you to solicit your response. And this quote comes from a press statement, or rather an editorial released by the F.W. de Klerk Foundation on the 5th of July 2021. This is before F.W. de Klerk died. And the quote from that editorial reads as follows: "Because of an informal agreement between the ANC leadership and former operatives of the pre-1994 government, the NPA suspended its prosecutions of apartheid-era crimes." What is your response to that statement from the F.W. de Klerk Foundation?
Chair, I just think that statement is so unfortunate. Unfortunate and unfair to us. But I also think if there were such discussions, we were then engaged not in good faith. We're taken through a process called Truth and Reconciliation. I'm not sure whether to just be a passage of what the country will pass through without meaningfully meaning what we have written down in black and white. When there has been discussions and arrangements on the other side that we are not going to do any other thing, or of the 37 or whatever, because I don't recall in the entire time I've spent in all these cases where I've come across a single family which will say the state has engaged them in good faith. I even prefer it. I do wish sometimes that how I wish the guys who are involved in my sister's case just went to the TRC and said, we buried her away. I promise you, Chair, I wouldn't be sitting in front of you today. Because the only thing I want is just her remains. Nothing will bring me anything. I don't believe my mom as well. She has lived 1983 to date, over 40 years or so, without knowing what happened to a child. She has crashed, has done anything possible. I've stopped taking her to court. SABC have got records of her crying in court. Nothing moves anyone. She just wants her remains. So for any arrangement to be done, actually I think I did a media interview after that clip of the demise of FW de Klerk. There was that video which he recorded and asking an apology, and it played on our national screen. I was approached for an interview. I was livid, Chair. I was very livid. I wish he had not died and I go to him and say, were we guinea pigs? Were we a joke? That you will put a system that you don't mean it and make us to undergo it with all our emotions and pain. And then ultimately, you know what happened, you record a video, you say, play it when I've passed, so that we remain with what? A recording. I'm very livid about that. I want to hear nothing. I think it's unfair, it's insensitive, it's cruel to say the least. It's done by people who just don't care about what happened to the real loved ones of those they don't care about today. And I find it very hard to comprehend it. I think that's how I feel then, that's how I felt then, that's how I feel now. I just will find no peace, but I don't have a choice, of course, but to live. But I get it to be very unfair, what we have been taken through. I don't like it.
Ms. Simelane, over the last 30 odd years, has either the NPA or the SAPS, or for that matter, any senior person in government, ever taken responsibility for these delays, or ever offered an apology for these delays?
Not once, Chair. Not once. And in some instances, I'll be deliberating with them in boardrooms. That is not over a telephone or whatever. And I will ask them directly, do you realize the harm we have caused? You can imagine how my aunt received the message when I told her, come back again and redo the interview about your daughter, the docket is lost. She was in anguish, she was in pain. And nothing has ever made the NPA or the police to just say once, we think we have erred here. Maybe it was going to make the situation even much better. Because taking responsibility is one step towards forgiveness, you know, but also holding yourself accountable. It has never happened. And I'm way past expecting it to happen. I just want the right thing to be done. I can live without an apology, I'm fine. But I think they owe it, not only to me, to all those families in that box which they showed me in the boardroom of the NPA, which had those cases which were referred by the TRC. They owe it to all those people, not only Noatula or Noatula's family. They owe us an apology.
Ms. Simelane, in fact, more than 10 years ago, on the 30th anniversary of Noatula's disappearance, you wrote an opinion piece in the City Press, and it was titled My Sister's Heart, on the 26th of December 2013. Commissioners, a copy of that opinion piece is attached to the affidavit of Mr. Lukhanya Kalata in Bundle 1, marked FA 84. I want to put some short extracts to you and ask you whether you wish to elaborate anything further now that we are, some 13 years later. The story of my sister Noatula Simelane is about freedom and betrayal. My sister believed in freedom with every fiber of her being. And I'm going to cut to the end of your opinion piece. We have lost all faith in the prosecutors and police. They have betrayed our trust. They now claim that they are occupied with inquiries which could conceivably drag on indefinitely while witnesses and suspects grow old and die. We do not know why the authorities in the New South Africa would turn their backs on one of their own. Noatula's ultimate sacrifice helped to pave the way for the freedom and democracy we now enjoy. We cannot bury her, and we can find no peace. The betrayal of my sister and what she stood for is almost complete. Do you have anything to add to that statement?
Chair, I think I must try and picture and make you picture a household which is incomplete. Any moment at home, no matter how jubilant or happy we are, my mom can just start to cry. Whether I'm getting married, whether I'm graduating, whether we're eating, she'll just say, I'm eating, I don't know what happened to my child. I don't know if she's eating, I don't know if she's alive. If you watch the clip of my father testifying as he was concluding, he was tearing. It's there on record. His final plea, allow me to put my daughter to her final resting place. And it just makes me a failure. I feel it every day. But also, Chair, I feel that we've given hope, all our being to the system that promised us something that is tangible that we can hold on and work towards too. It's not that I don't accept that she was a victim of the system. I've gone way past that. I'm sure you can ask so many families that are past that. What we need is the truth. And I do believe we deserve the truth. I do not believe these delays, Chair, were solely caused by negligence and incompetence on both the part of the NPA and the SAPS. Maybe I would believe it if I was not personally involved in that process. It's a hearsay. So when I'm talking about a letter, I'm talking about a letter I wrote. When I'm talking about a meeting, I'm talking about a meeting where I physically met them. And I could tell you what was their attitude, what was their pace, what was their outlook towards these matters. I believe there's some force outside that made sure that these investigations do not continue. Whether there was a good reason for that or not, I don't know, because we were never told. But what I find unfair and the greatest betrayal to Noatula and all is when we deny them even a dignified grave. I just can't see myself beyond that. You can betray them in who sent them out, who sent them in, who gave them this and that message, who didn't. We can go past that. But for us, after the TRC, to be treated shabbily like we have been treated and be denied the truth which leads to closure on what happened to our loved ones, it's gross, Chair. I think it's so unfair, it's so unfortunate, and I hope it never happens ever again to anybody else. If I don't find Noatula and her final resting place, the only thing we could give South Africa is that there must never be another Noatula. I can live with that. But I can tell you now, I'm not sure if my mom watching at home, she's happy that I'm saying I can accept that she can't bury her child. I know she can't, but what else can I do? I think that's how I feel, Chair, and I'm going to make a plea to you and all, and the Commission, and anybody who you are likely to see. Please help us. Look into this allegation, not only the allegation, but look beyond into what could be done. The family members we interact with, even the president funds never paid for their schooling. So there was a truth, reconciliation, and reparations. So I find it very difficult to understand that when you don't get the truth, you don't get a reparation as well. What type of a system was this? that we were put into and we have got no options on it. No one talks to us, no one engages us. We're just somewhere there at the back. I'm sorry to rant, Chair, but let me stop here. It hurts.
Thank you for your evidence, Ms. Simlani. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vani. Mr. Siminya, I see Ms. Ntoko is not here. Is there anyone for the SAPS for clarificatory questions?
So, Chairperson, Matlaripula Ranto for the SAPS.
Yes.
I am still taking instructions in response
Okay.
to what was before. So we will not be doing any examination this afternoon, Chairperson.
Well, you would have been allowed questions of clarifications only.
At this stage now.
Because you have to apply to bring an application to cross-examine the witness.
I'm
So you
mindful
have
of
no such instructions.
Not as yet. I am
Yes.
mindful of that, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who is representing the parties other than the evidence leaders? Mr. Siminya?
Chairperson, we want to record that in the ordinary course of events, clearly after the testimony in chief of a witness, one would have expected that there would be cross-examinations or questions for clarification, and the witness would then be re-examined if such a re-examination is indicated. But what happens like this is that we are constrained by non-assistance of various state parties. Again, we would have been better placed to put those allegations if we got the statements and the witness would have had an opportunity to react, respond to any such things. We don't have that now, but that may necessitate unfairly and prejudicially maybe to witnesses to be recalled once we have statements that seem to want to refute, explain, clarify any of her testimony. So we lament that fact as a matter of record. But Minister, you have to accept that 42 years, as you indicate in your statement, is an inordinate length of time for an investigation to happen properly. Is that right?
Not necessarily, Chair. I believe you could also would have done more in the 42 years to get it to be investigated properly.
Yes, that's the point I'm making. It's very, very long delay to investigate a matter of the kind you described.
Okay.
42 years is a very, very,
It's a very long time. Agreed, Chair.
And given that it is an obligation placed on a state that is sovereign, that has resources, it is hardly explicable. It's inexplicable. You'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
I fully agree, Chair.
And I want to use the basis of your evidence, which clearly shows the enormity of the agony, pain, and suffering and hurt that you, your family, and others would have underwent throughout this period. Is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
And you'd expect that at least the government, given that they are given notice of the establishment of a commission, state-run, would do more to assist, even if by way of explanation as opposed to justification, why we are here. Correct?
It's correct, Chair, but I must also put it on record, Chair. The response is what I expected. In fact, from the state, because this is the response that I was getting. It actually coincided exactly with my testimony. my testimony says I will go to the state has never called me, not once. So I wasn't expecting any different for you, Chair, that if you call them to this commission, they'll come with what is expected to have been brought. If you were to ask me, I would have said to my attorneys, I told you so.
And for the record again, we place it that we have issued requests for information to almost all the national police commissioners who are alive. And we are still awaiting explanations, if nothing else, and if there could be justifications, I'll be surprised. You share that sentiment?
I share that sentiment, Chair. I actually even saw the statement, a media statement, which was explaining that process and calling on everyone to bring any information that he has. So I agree, but the response is not amazing to me. The non-response or non-action thereof, at least from the state, is not amazing to me.
And whatever postulate we have, the type of possible interference can only be from the state. Is that a fair assertion to make?
Very fair, Chair. It's an assertion I agree with. It's an assertion I hold personally as well, having undertaken the journey that I have, that it could have only been within the state itself.
And as you say, 42 years after the disappearance of your sister, justice is not home and has not arrived.
Yeah, and Chair, I'm about to believe that it will never arrive, sadly.
Those are the questions, Chair, we have for the witness for now.
Thank you, Mr. Siminya. Yes.
Thank you, Minister. Has anybody in the present government tendered any apology or explanation to you for your 42 years of waiting?
Honorable Chair, nobody. Maybe what we also overlooked rather in how we wrote, because quite a lot has happened in 42 years, honestly, Chair. We also, the letters ourselves as victims wrote, I think to President Zuma we wrote, to President Ramaphosa we wrote. In some instances, there was not even an acknowledgement of receipt. And we were just asking to say, can we be assisted? We may have not mentioned it, but I think in some of my affidavits I did, but I think in the 4th November one, it might have not been mentioned. So, Chair, we have tried, when I say to knock on all doors, really, we have, and we have not received any form of support whatsoever. So there was no apology.
Mr. Vani?
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to that question, I can assist the Commission, and in fact, the former commissioners and family members did call on President Ramaphosa when asking for a commission of inquiry to also offer an apology to the families. And that letter is attached to the Kalata founding affidavit in Bundle 1. It was written in early 2019, and it's at Annex FA 68. It's also discussed at paragraphs 483 to 484 of that affidavit. And then family members, also later that year, on the 23rd of June, family members belonging to the Timol families, Biko, Latuli, Creel, and others, on 23rd of June 2019, they also asked for a commission of inquiry as well as an apology. And those letters are attached to the Kalata founding affidavit as FA 72 and 73, and discussed at paragraph 490 of that affidavit in Bundle 1, no apology was forthcoming from those letters. Chair, if I may add to what my learned friend, Mr. Semenya, for the evidence leaders, has said about the lack of response from some of the parties, including the SAPS. Certainly from the perspective of the families, it's very disappointing that in this constitutional order we have departments of state and ministers who are effectively turning their backs on this commission. Most of them didn't even bother to offer opening addresses yesterday, which the families find quite insulting. And we call on these departments and ministers and the head of state to reconsider their approach to this commission and to treat it seriously. Now, in relation to outstanding statements, we're concerned that some of the parties believe they can dictate to this commission when they will file and deliver. So, for example, we know that Rule 3.3 notices were issued last year in and around September, and they should have filed their responses within weeks of those notices. And so, for example, we would like to hear from the first NDPP, Advocate Bilelani Nguka, the acting NDPP that followed him, Advocate Silas Ramaite, as well as other figures who played a role at the very beginning. But we're told there are no statements from them. And at one of the meetings, they simply announced that they will deliver their statements in March, without explanation. Because our witnesses, particularly Advocates Ackerman and Advocate Pekoli, we believe they should only testify after we've heard from Advocates Nguka, Ramaite, and also Advocate McAdam, who was also dealing with these cases before Pekoli and Ackerman came onto the scene. So the logical order of the inquiry really should follow what happened, as opposed to being jumbled around. And we would respectfully ask this commission to order the production of those affidavits, not in March, but within a reasonable time, given that they should have been delivered last year. And we would submit that those affidavits should be submitted within 5 days of today. By the end of next Tuesday is when we think those affidavits should be put up, and those individuals should make themselves available to testify shortly thereafter. And in relation to outstanding documents that the evidence leaders are still waiting for from the SABC and elsewhere, well, yes, cooperation is ideally the best way to secure documentation. One wants to engage collegially with these authorities. But if you've been knocking your head against a brick wall and nothing is emerging, then the responsible individuals must be placed on a subpoena. They must come to this commission and explain why they haven't delivered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vani. The state of affairs is disconcerting and perturbing. I think it is sufficient for me to say so and nothing more at this stage. We may be compelled to use our powers of compulsion as provided for by the rules and the regulations. The time has not yet come, but it is fast approaching. Mr. Vani, the SAPS has just indicated that they do not have instructions with regard to the cross-examination of the minister. it seems inescapable that we may have to have the minister come back to this commission for such cross-examination if these instructions are to surface. Will that be convenient for the minister?
Chair, we will consult with the Minister, although I'm assuming that from her perspective she will do everything she can to assist this Commission.
Yes. Minister, we thank you for having made yourself available to this commission and for your evidence. You are excused as a witness for now, but you may be recalled with a view of being cross-examined by, amongst others, the SAPS. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Honorable Commissioners.
These proceedings are adjourned for the day until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
As the Commission pleases.